The human genome has been mapped. Scientists are now trying to decipher this mysterious set of chromosomes. Along with that, however, are some experiments that border on the unethical. According to the Bible, in the last days, there will be some kind of genetic manipulation, as it was in the days of Noah. The Greeks called them Chimera, human-animal hybrids. Gerstner is here to discuss the nightmare of the human chimera.
And thanks, JR. In the March 2005 edition of Prophecy in the News, we have this article, The Nightmare of the Human Chimera. Now, what would a human chimera be, JR? It would be a human composed of parts that were other than human. And the word chimera comes from Greek mythology, and we're going to be talking about Greek mythology quite a bit on this program. The Greek historian Hesiod reports that the first chimera was a three-headed monster who had three heads, each head corresponding to three animals that supposedly lived in a volcano or near a volcano where the chimera sprang forth. And these animals were lions, goats, and serpents. Well, the chimera came out of the volcano and terrified the residents of Lycia. And you had a lion-headed, goat-bodied, goat-headed, serpent-headed monster that was running around terrorizing the inhabitants of the earth. Well, guess what? The Greek hero called Bellerophon and his flying horse Pegasus, also, I might add, a chimera, a winged horse, rescued the residents of Lycia from the chimera. But JR, out of this mythology, there comes a deeper and I think very much more real story.
I've seen pictures, for example, we have one here in the article about the gods of Egypt with animal heads, human bodies. This sort of thing, I don't know exactly how far it went back in the days of Noah, but the Bible does say that Noah was perfect in his generations, indicating that there was some disintegration of the human genome in his day that required the destruction of the human race.
And we have, in ancient history, a virtual unanimity about the existence of these human-animal combinations. For example, among the Egyptian gods, you had the god Horus, the body of a man, the head of a hawk. You had the god Anubis, who had the head of a jackal, the body of a man. The god Thoth, he was the god of wisdom. And Thoth had the head of an ibis and the body of a man. Well, on it goes. The Babylonians had their chimeras. The Ninevites had their chimeras. The Babylonian lion had the parts of different animals, including hoofs, I believe, and wings. So it was a chimera as well. All of which brings us to the question of genetics, because, JR, we've arrived at the age of the human chimera right now in the 21st century. Let's talk about a mouse with a human ear growing out of its back. And that mouse was created for the sole purpose of harvesting that ear and applying it to a human being who had lost an ear. Now, this is a wonderful procedure for the man who's lost an ear, but now we have the ability to create human-animal chimeras in the lab.
To me, it sounds like Frankenstein.
Yes.
Dr. Frankenstein.
Indeed. And in fact, the Frankenstein monster is the direct result, the Frankenstein monster that's before us right now, is the direct result of laboratory experimentation with T cells. Everybody's heard about T cells lately. You can now take, for example, the genetic material of a mouse, the egg and the sperm. You can inject those T cells into the egg and sperm of a mouse, and right now today it's technically possible to bring together the mouse egg and sperm cells that have been implanted with human T cells and bring forth a human embryo, which, if implanted into a woman, would then allow her to come to full term and give birth to a human baby. But JR, that human baby's parents would be a female mouse and a male mouse. That's scary to me. Very scary.
Incredible. In case you're thinking that this is a moot problem that is borders on unreality, in the days of Noah, angels came down and cohabited with women. Now, there are some theologians who say, well, those were just the sons of Seth. Well, listen to what Flavius Josephus had to say about it. Quote, this is the Jewish historian of the first century. Quote, but for what degree of zeal they had formerly shown for virtue, they now showed by their actions a double degree of wickedness, whereby they made God to be their enemy. For many angels of God accompanied with women and beget sons that proved unjust and despisers of all that was good, on account of the confidence they had in their own strength. For the tradition is that these men did what resembled the acts of those whom the Grecians called giants. Here is a Jewish theologian / historian who is saying that in Genesis chapter 6, when it says the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair and took them wives, all which they chose, that these sons of God were angels, not the sons of Seth. And that's actually the way other theologians or historians of the past have viewed them. Josephus was not the first or the only.
Oh, no, there are literally, I think, dozens, if not hundreds, of Greek and Roman historians who have their little addition to this narrative. For example, Plato, in the Critias, wrote the story of a demigod named Poseidon. He's the sea god. He came down and married a human woman, and she gave birth to 10 sets of twins. Now, one of the boys born from the union between Poseidon and his wife was named Atlas, and we've all heard about Atlas, holding up the world on his shoulders and so forth. But Atlas was the father of Atlantis. Atlas is the one for whom the Atlantic Ocean is named. And Plato speaks of all of this as though it were history. He doesn't speak of it as mythology. He just relates it as something that really happened. And then he goes on to tell about the destruction of Atlantis in a huge flood. And Plato says this flood, by the way, was greater than any flood ever recorded before it happened or since it happened. Now, J.R., I can't help but reflect that the Bible talks about a great flood. And it talks about a man who was saved in that great flood. Noah, Genesis 6:8, found grace in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and Noah walked with God. This brings us to the issue, I believe. The central issue here is that Noah was perfect in his generations. That is, he was genetically unsullied.
Yes. Which means that everybody else had a problem.
Yes.
So the human genome had been corrupted. And I must tell you that sort of thing is happening in laboratories today. And please understand that Jesus, looking into the far future, said, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. There's going to be a rise in genetic manipulations in the last days, which will bring on the final judgment upon mankind.
J.R., let me name a couple of examples here. At the University of Nevada at Reno, there's a gentleman by the name of Ismail Zanjani. He's the chairman of animal biotechnology. And he has presided over an experiment that has added human stem cells to sheep fetuses. The team now has sheep whose livers are up to 80% human and make all the compounds that human livers make. Now, the goal here is to create human livers in sheep. Well, it would be for transplant purposes. Medically speaking, you say, well, why not do this? It sounds like a wonderful thing, making spare parts for humans that need the spare parts. What's wrong with that? Well, JR, what's wrong with it is it's just the first step on a long road, and heaven only knows what might come out of such experimentation.
To take, for example, a human cell and clone anything human from it would be unethical.
Absolutely.
It violates God's law.
It certainly does, and in fact, in just the closing seconds of this section of our program, in Genesis 1:25, God made the beast of the earth after his kind. You know, J.R., every place creation is talked about and animals are talked about, it's after their kind. He didn't want that to be tampered with.
Well, there's more. We'll be back in just a moment.